Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus. As always, and unfortunately, I am the death metal guy, here again with the black metal guy, for a special, double fisting interview, as it were. So, around the time when you'll be listening to this, the new debut record by New Mexico's Heretical Sect will have come out, titled Rapturous Flesh Consumed, over on Gilead Media. Heretical Sect, a relatively new black death metal band, kind of lashed with bits of kind of doom and stoner rock here and there, are finally coming out with a moderately long-awaited full-length record, and we are happy to be joined today with Warg. And Warg, how are you doing today?
I'm so good. I'm excited to be on this podcast, so thank you.
We're excited to have you, because actually Warg, oddly enough, was one of the very early people to find us. What was it, like episode 3 or 4 you reached out to us or something?
Oh, yeah. Man, I was hungry for this podcast. I love metal podcasts, and I had a ton of free time. Thank you, COVID. So I was burning through Requiem metal. I like those guys. A little long-winded.
You're talking to the guys with 3-hour episodes. We're not long-winded.
Oh yeah, but if you talked about one band for 3 hours,
that's what they do. Oh shit.
Yeah. I mean, it's good. It's a lot of depth, but also Radical Research. If you haven't heard that one, those guys are great. But the thing about all of those is it's historical, or recordings from 20 years ago, taking deep dives, and then you guys are just hitting what's coming out like nobody else right now. And so I found a lot of good music and a lot of interesting conversations. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, you
plug, buddy.
You reached out a long time ago, and you were talking about having this record coming up. So finally, it's arriving. So give us a little bit of background for anyone who's not familiar with Heretical, because I hadn't... I think I was dimly familiar with you guys just by name before you reached out, and then that's when I got to listening to the first EP and now the full length. So how'd the band gestate?
Sure, yeah. It's been a project that's been in the works for a while. Me and a few of the other members have played together for quite some time, and for a couple years it was sort of casual thing, and eventually we had enough songs for the demo, which was called, or is called, Rotting Cosmic Grief, and that's a 4-song demo that came out on Vendetta, Redefining Darkness, and Caligari, or how do you say that?
It's Caligari.
Yeah.
I love how demos now get released on 3 different labels. It's interesting how
I was stoked about that. Yeah,
Metal Archives lists it as an EP.
That's a. We could probably spend the whole time talking about the difference. I don't know. I thought of it as a demo, but again, I mean, does something come to mind that distinguishes those two things for you?
Well, shit, man. I've never gotten one of my demos released on vinyl.
I think back in the day it was an obvious difference in production. And now that people can home produce a good sounding demo, it's becoming much less clear.
Right. So it was recorded as a demo, if you will. No studio, live take. Then we dubbed vocals and guitar, and it was all done in one day. So
cool.
Yeah, and I listened back to it, and it sounds like it was recorded in one day, but our album was recorded in 4 days. So I think there's a kind of amateur peaking quality to our music that I like. I mean, I think the classic black metal albums have this sort of just let loose and hope it goes well kind of feeling that
they feel
part of Heretical Sect.
They feel immediate.
Yes, definitely. I think one of the songs off of Rapturous Flesh Consumed, we had never played it all the way through until we recorded it.
Nice.
That an accomplishment.
That's a dangerous game to play when you're in a studio and the clock is ticking.
Yeah. So we did the demo, and I was excited about it, and I feel we have an interesting process where we record the music, and then I take the music home and do all of the vocals and everything on my own. Mm-hmm. What's nice about that is I can take months at a time to kind of figure out what it's about and what it means to me. And I think that one of the reasons that our band is catching some traction is because I'm trying to create a lot of meaning out of the songs that we create and sort of have them fit into a world. I don't know if the lyrics are going to really immerse people in those worlds or not. That's kind of for them to say, but I think at least we're trying to portray maybe something that connects with people and is a little unique.
Well, elaborate on that. What's the world then?
Yeah, so we are focused on the Southwest, and the sort of interesting part for me is focusing on atrocities, conquest, and the sort of degradation that happened here. And it's interesting because it's all stuff that death and black metal talk about, but instead of being Eurocentric, it's sort of localized and we get to make it our own. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that many artists have done. I think we're maybe just bringing it to extreme metal in a way that maybe nobody else has done. It's not like it's important to know those things. It's still, my God, it's still like a serial killer going crazy, but it happens to have a little more context. Is the only difference. Yeah.
So you said it's based on... Yeah, so you found a story that has the horror qualities of death and black metal, IRL. And for our listeners, the press release says the new record is about Salvador de Guerra, a religious zealot and Catholic padre, infamous for mutilation and torture. So why don't you tell us about this guy?
Oh, yeah. Well, it is really interesting stuff. But what is actually crazy about that guy is he was not unique in how he treated Native people really whatsoever. And there's a few good books that kind of chronicle the extent to which Native people suffered under the Catholic Church and the Spanish conquest in general. And it's crazy stuff. A big focus for, heavy metal and European metal is like the witch trials. And the Spanish Inquisition was actually active in New Mexico, which is like a mind-blowing fact to me. So you have the Spanish Inquisition actively capturing Native people who practice their own religion and treating them like witches. So you have basically foreign invaders who are putting their religion on these people and then treating them like witches or like they're doing something wrong for just believing and practicing what they've always believed. And it's really insane stuff. The Padres were infamous for both torturing Native people to make the suffering of Christ real, and then also torturing themselves. And they had this really weird relationship with coming to New Mexico. They thought of it as a holy pilgrimage in which their suffering would allow them to sort of access heaven. So in cases where Natives people revolted and even killed these martyrs, killed these Padres, they were happy about it as if that was what their whole purpose was to die in these violent ways. So, in this process of conquest, you had the kind of superior technology of the Spanish people, and then the most interesting part to me is the cosmology. So, because the Spanish brought the technology, horses, a lot of what, first world or whatever ideas at that time, it seemed, or it was perceived by some native people, that they were gods walking on Earth. And
yeah, that happened with the Aztecs in particular.
yeah, and there was some previous mythology that sort of anticipated this arrival. And so in some ways it fit in with their thoughts as far as what the future held for them. And this is written about extensively in a book called When Jesus Came, the Corn Mothers Went Away. And it breaks down the sort of tangling of worlds as far as how native people experienced the supernatural world and what Christianity did to them. And so that collision is sort of where I think I find my voice most. Because I don't think there's anything more destructively degrading than having your sense of the cosmos be destroyed. So, yeah.
Sure, yeah. So, yeah, and that obviously very consistent with the preoccupations of black metal. It seems like there's a fictional, sort of a creative element to this too. So it sounds like you've digested a bunch of books, historical books, and also brought to bear your own almost kind of like, your kind of metal Lovecraftian lens on this. You say that this album explores Guerra's insanity and postulates some reasoning behind his actions, seeing him obsess over the relationships between Christianity and native beliefs. So I guess that's kind of what you just said. Maybe he realizes there are these prophecies, but specifically you say attempting to marry the two through his own blasphemous rituals. So what kind of thing are you imagining there? Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's interesting stuff because it's sort of like I wrote a story in order to have a perspective to work from when I wrote the lyrics.
Oh, cool.
And so the story is just to facilitate the writing of the lyrics so that I can become someone else. And that transferal of my perspective into this kind of insane and belligerent and holy, but obviously not. And to sort of see it from a first-person perspective, just so that I can embody the character that I want to put into the story. I think that it's hard to actually write and talk about this stuff because it can get really didactic or preachy. And I grew up with like punk music, and they're just laying out their ideas on you all the time. And when I was young, I'm sure maybe you guys felt the same way, it was really nice to have that because you felt that camaraderie with somebody feeling the same way and you're revolting or whatever. But now when you listen to those things, it's grating because you don't need somebody to tell you how to think about the world, and you're a fully formed adult. And so I want to be able to talk about these things and write about them without being like, this is bad. So being within the story is kind of how I navigate that conundrum.
Oh yeah, you can, by doing that, you give it some of the nuance and the complexity that real events actually have, rather than just sort of an ideological screed,
Oh yeah, totally. And the music demands an intensity that, like, when if you tried to write about your day or whatever, it would inevitably lead to these things of intense, emotive, violent, outer space. It's just an inevitability of the way the music sounds. So I have to let that lead for sure. Otherwise, there's so many bands who kind of put lyrical content that doesn't really make sense with the music. So that's kind of always the balance I'm looking to find. Because when I listen to the music, those are the places I go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure inevitably that's true for all of us. Like, why does death metal even exist?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be. It has to be governed. I mean, it's an auditory medium, so it has to be governed by the sound of it and the impression of it. And I've always believed that music is a better. It's an avenue or a medium that's better at communicating sort of abstract ideas rather than extremely direct ones. So that all basically scans to me.
Yeah, I really agree with that, and I mean, I find it to be such a necessary part of my life, in a way that I think it's really meaningful, and I think that when we talk about the music and the experience of it, it often kind of avoids the part that is important to me. That like this is like almost like a spiritual practice or something. It has a value that maybe transcends the sort of mundane. And that's how I like to think about it, especially because there's such a preoccupation with religion that it's sort of reclaiming of the spiritual space back from the sort of pure piety of religion. And that, I think, is what the heretical sect idea is about. It connects the idea of a heretical sect or heretical sects actually comes from witch trial time, 1700s. My wife is a sort of feminist scholar, and there's this great book called The Caliban and the Witch, and it explores these groups that were resisting the church at that time and how they were suppressed, and also how the witch trials were kind of created as a way of oppressing these people who had pretty radical beliefs, alternative ways of seeing the world.
So you're saying witch trials were mobilized in England and in New England against like radical Protestant dissenters? People
yes,
who were,
yeah, exactly, yeah. And people who believe things that are very similar to what we believe today. And this is all, I mean, it's really interesting stuff. But yeah, I became aware of that through my wife and her studies, and her artwork is also really inspiring to what I do. And so through that was kind of where the heretical sect idea was born, tying into your first question. And then, I guess going on to the idea of the warging, it also ties in because I really didn't feel like I wanted to do these ideas as myself. I've been in bands, and the people I play with are in other active bands, and it just did not seem like the kind of idea that I wanted to take on as into my normal life. Like, I have a very full and kind of demanding normal life, and this would be a good way to have that break and have this sort of spiritual metal, whatever dark self that could be expounded upon and explored fully without worrying about, oh, that's that guy from that great business or whatever.
Well, I mean, I think that's been an intrinsic thing about Black and, some of the more kind of spiritually tuned in reaches of death metal is the idea of, embodying a mythic character through which to channel art that is beyond the mortal. That's a really pretentious way to say it, but yeah, I think you get what I mean.
I mean, we're not pretending.
I think that's a pretty great example. I used to laugh at that. I used to feel repulsed by that. My life was already so kind of alternatively extreme that step seemed goofy. But as I invested in these ideas and my life became so much more normal, I found my metal self wanting to be much more extreme. And now it's like, I can't wait to cover myself in blood, It's like, that's exciting. But that's like a different part of my daily self. And so I feel like the normalization, having a family, running a business, all of these kind of real world responsibilities needs to be balanced out by a more extreme, a more radicalized spiritual death metal, black metal being. So that's what this means to me, and it's great to have that.
Well, that's interesting because we've actually talked on the show a little bit about how, for the both of us, it's such a common thing to see with bands or musicians that it's almost a trope at this point, which is as they get older and a little bit more settled into life, so to speak, the music tends to soften, which is just the complete opposite of what we've experienced growing up. And we're perpetually, as we grow up, as we settle in, I'm married now, and I basically have my life together. I want more and more extreme music and more extreme kind of modes of expression. So it's interesting that there's other people.
I now feel hostile to rock music. It sounds like rock music. Back in the day, it'd be like Broad Tent. It'd be like, oh, yeah, some grunge, man. Yeah, I can get down with Nirvana. Now it's like, this shit sounds like Nirvana.
Well, completely. And especially when it comes to making music. Like, the things I listen to are all over the place, and I'm excited about that. I'm excited about lots of different types of music as far as a consumer, but when it comes to making it, it's got to be just like dark and fucking evil as possible.
Well, that's kind of interesting because that's something I've thought about myself, which is, as a musician, what I listen to and what I create are radically different. Like, there's a lot of styles of music, or even within extreme metal, that I like listening to a lot, but I just feel paralyzed when I try to create it. It's just not the mode that I work in. So.
Yeah, I feel that way too. I don't think, in some ways it's sort of like if you're really being yourself, it's like you don't really get to choose what you make.
Yeah, I was about to say, you don't get to choose your mode of expression. It kind of chooses you.
And actually, this is, I play drums and do vocals, so I'm obviously like the most caveman, useless member of the band.
Well, that's the vocalist part is useless, but
drummer vocalist is a classic combination for some reason.
Well, I'm completely honest here. I can't really do both at the same time. We've played a few shows, and I've mumbled out, half the lyrics. So there is a sort of fork in the road as far as that goes, and it's whether we become a 5-piece band and I do vocals or not, which would be getting a lot better at being able to do both of those things at the same time. But I should give a shout out actually to my guys. So Coffin Beast, sick guitar player. The other guitar player in the band is named Demonic Haze, also awesome. And Crypt Hammer is the bass player.
Demonic Haze, I think I had that strain one time.
Oh yeah, that is literally that is how we got that name.
I had that strain, and I saw neon.
Yeah, he's like the pig pen of weed. He's just in the cloud.
You're from New Mexico. I mean, you got to do something. So,
Yeah.
Well, speaking of New Mexico, I mean, what's it? I mean, that's in terms of scene or in terms of community for this kind of music out there. I mean, you guys are out of Santa Fe, right?
Yeah, Santa Fe is like one of the most amazing cities in the United States. It's incredible. It has a really unique sense of itself. It's a small town. But
Well,
again,
it's kind of positioning itself to be like the new Austin or something, I think.
oh God, I hope not.
Well,
But
you know what I mean.
I
Young
know what you
university
mean.
population, art town, that kind of shit.
It is an art town. We don't have a university, so that's one of the weird things about it, actually. And I think in some ways, although we have a penitentiary, which is sick. Um, no, so that's one of the weird things. It really should have a university, but it's small. We have 60,000 people. Um, our weather is incredible. There's never humidity. We have mountains. We live in the high desert. There's people have lived here continually for 2,000 years. You know, you can go to Taos Pueblo, and there's the homes, the structures that people have been living in for 1,000 years there and still live in to this day,
Whoa,
which is
cool.
incredible.
There are still people living in Pueblo dwellings?
Yeah, yeah. They claim, and there's another Pueblo Acoma, but between the two, they're the longest occupied dwellings in North America, continuously occupied dwellings in North America. Big, beautiful skies. The colors here are incredible. We just had, of course, our fall season. We have aspens, yellow trees lining the mountains. I spend a ton of time outdoors. We have, ski mountains. I'm a professional artist, as is my wife. So it's incredible. And then in relationship to music, we have a small but really strong scene that is surprisingly good for what a small town we have. There's a couple venues, a really good DIY venue that one of our members helps with. It's called The Cave.
In a town of 60,000, that's impressive.
It's impressive. I mean, huge bands coming through. They want to play here, not Albuquerque, which has 1 million people or whatever, and is an hour away. So it's a special place. The Cave is like one of those places that is legendary and like shouldn't have existed, but does. After that ghost fire, this DIY spot's just dried up, but it's going strong. There's a skate ramp. There's, kegs and good music, and people really turn up for that and support it. And there's a bunch of other places too, so it's awesome.
Nice. Yeah. What other bands do you feel some common connection with? I remember there was some connection to Predatory Light, who are probably the band from that region that I know best.
Yeah, Predatory Light is a huge band for me. I guess without giving away too much, that was one of the bands I started playing in. And we still have members that are in that band. They're awesome. I think it's hard for me to talk about because they're like one of my favorite bands.
Oh, for sure.
But
like
yeah, I'm not
close.
involved anymore. And then Superstition, incredible death metal. They're on $20 spin. Then you got a band called Dysphotic. They are sort of death doomy, amazing, big sounding band. That was recorded by the same person who's also in the band who recorded our album. His name is Augustine Ortiz, and he runs a studio here. That's probably one of the bigger things, is he runs a really affordable, high-end studio. I mean, relatively speaking. So bands can afford to record albums. It's like not a big deal. He's extremely talented and very patient and fun to work with. I said we recorded our album in 4 days, but we took like a month to mix it, and that was awesome. That was such a great experience. I learned a ton. we would just sit down. Not like we sat for a month. We only sat a few times, but it stretched over a long period. And just going over all the details and really working it out to get the sound that I imagined. And he worked with me to find that on every detail, which was awesome to have that experience where somebody would, a lot of times when you have a studio, they're like, here's a mix 1. You want another mix? That's mix 2. And it wasn't like that at all. It was like each part, each sound was shaped to what I had in mind. So
cool.
Impressive. Yeah.
Yeah. So that band is Dysphotic, Dysphotic, for our listeners.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And then the other one that is really good is Street Tombs, which is just classic black and thrash. I think they have an album coming out on Carbonized.
Street Tombs?
Street Tombs.
Very, very skate.
Oh, yeah. So yeah,
I'm going to kickflip right into my coffin.
They skateboard. Yes, exactly. I skateboarded. That was a huge part of my life. I had knee surgery 4 years ago. It's no longer a part of my life at all. So, but yeah.
I gotcha. So in terms of this record, kind of bridging it back to the original EP, what was kind of the goal that you guys had in mind of how to build upon it? What is the arc or the trajectory of the band? I know that's kind of vague, but I think you get what I mean.
I understand. I mean, I think that for me and for Crypthammer, this is like our primary vehicle of expression, and this is sort of everything for us. I mean, if it wasn't for COVID, there would be a lot more happening now. I unfortunately have some older people in my life, so I'm very cautious. I'm not practicing, which is unfortunate, but I've got so much to do in relationship to the band. It's kind of been fine. But I think that I'm hoping we can kind of all consolidate our powers behind this, and that this is just kind of the first step. And I'm happy it's gotten such traction for a first album. But I think that we're capable of a whole lot more. And we were sort of just testing the limits of what we could do together. And the unfortunate thing is right before we stopped, we were writing new material. We were playing pretty ferociously. There's a groove that you get after, years of playing together where new ideas just click really easily. Mm-hmm. So I'm very hopeful that we can re-access that place. I already have a vision of what the next album is going to be about and have started to kind of explore that in writing. Everybody's a very capable musician. Crypthammer went to music school, so he knows notes.
Oh shit!
I mean, I don't know those. So.
I know. Right?
I've heard of those. It's a wizard came to my town and he spoke of notes.
Yeah, so I got a guitar actually because I said, I need to contribute more. I learned D.
Mm-hmm. Well, you see, that was your mistake. You learned a whole chord. You already fucked up if you want to play black metal,
Oh, I know. Just open strings and switch between them. All trem.
Well, I mean, yeah, you can basically play Freezing Moon like that, so that'll work.
Really? I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, the opening riff and arpeggio is just, a big open chord and then just an open arpeggio. Yeah, it's the easiest thing in the world.
Well, now that you told me that, I don't need these guys.
Exactly. You're ready to... that's... As you develop as a black metal musician, your most important move is, starting 3 dark ambient side projects,
That's right.
So we're looking forward to that, Warg.
Oh, speaking of, because, I was doing all the shout-outs for New Mexico here, my good friend and neighbor, relatively speaking, because we live very far away from each other, but we live rural, is Valak. Totally worth checking out. Super prolific, and his label is called Banner of Blood. Valak is spelled Valac, and he's just super prolific. I think maybe 4 or 5 albums during this time, and it is worth your time.
All right. That's raw black metal, according to Metal Archives?
It is raw black metal.
Oh, there we go. That's the guy we need to talk to. There we go.
Oh, yeah. I will put you in contact.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It looks cool. I mean, he's got his picture. He's got a candelabra and everything, and he's hunched
chains.
over and sad. So there we go. That's right up our alley.
He's a great guy. Don't let the picture fool you.
Well, you see, now I'm less interested. I don't want great guys on my show. I want, like, fucked up weirdos.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Yeah, you may be the most you might be the most well-balanced person we've interviewed.
Yeah, you sound like you kind of have your shit together. It's kind of upsetting.
Yeah, I just came to shame you.
You've
been. Oh, did you hear that?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, no, before we got on, me and Warg were talking about how he had his drinks open so he wouldn't, like, open them on air, and I was like, have you listened to our podcast? That's half of what we do is just cracking beers.
Oh, yeah, you got beautiful tone on that. What are you listening to? What are you drinking?
Oh, man, this is some bougie stuff here. So it was my birthday not too long ago, and I imported mead from Vermont, and so I'm having a Nordic farmhouse ale. It's a saison style with cranberries in it. Groenfell Meadery. I don't know. It's wonderful.
That's cool. I'm drinking Early Times and Coke.
Wait, isn't Early Times a beer?
I mean, there probably is a beer called Early Times.
Oh, no, that's Simpler Times. Simpler Times.
No, Early Times is a really shitty Kentucky whiskey. It's like $11 for a liter.
Oh, damn. Yeah, no, Simpler Times is a beer at Trader Joe's.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, you see, you got to talk to the black metal guy about all this bougie shit. I mean, I just drink garbage all the time. So
not true. You like sours.
I do like sours.
Oh, I mean, that's what this is. It's it's wonderfully sour, but it's not beer. It's mead. You know.
Yeah. Okay.
So
it's like one of these. Yeah, I've tried to get into mead before because whole Viking thing, but I don't think I've tried the right things. It always tastes more like wine than I expect.
It depends on
the wrong stuff. It tastes like watered down wine, which is not how you want wine. But it's when it's good, it's good.
The problem for me with mead is I've had so many experiences where I've like been at a festival and it's like, oh, they have mead there, and it's in the middle of the summer, so you chug like 8 of those back to back. Ooh. And you just have this solid rock of sugar in your stomach for the rest of the day. It's a little bit much.
I think eight horns of skunked mead is the new Corpiclani song.
Oh man, or Corpiclani even
so
around.
I want to put you guys on the spot because I have this really hard time with talking about genres in relationship to our music, so I just claim them all. Because to me, I come from and think about music in this kind of black metal mindset is like where I want it to be coming from. But then like there's all this demonic haze in the room and we get these big stoner riffs. But like, what does it sound like to you, like genre-wise?
I mean, I talked about it up front as kind of Black Death. There's still a little bit of the stoner stuff. It's less stoner, and it's more straight kind of doom stuff. I think the more of the stoner aspects were on the first demo.
Yeah, definitely.
That's been downplayed a little bit.
Yeah, the first demo had the more stoner stuff and more kind of like banging Celtic Frost riffs.
Yeah.
Which I thought gave it a unique regional twist. I was like, oh, this is what New Mexico black metal would sound like. Or, but yeah, sort of like arty, textural Black Death. It sounds kind of like some of the stuff that would get called cavern core, but it's not really, it doesn't really have that connection to like, well, it's certainly not like Impetuous Ritual or some of that really noisy, kind of rumbly shit.
Yeah, I like that band for sure.
Yeah.
But
for sure.
It's a little indistinct, and we have a little more clarity. But Cavern Core is not something I've heard before.
Oh yeah, man!
Except maybe you've mentioned it on the podcast.
Oh, like bands like Abyssal or Grave Upheaval. Although
Grave Upheaval's great.
Although I always thought it was a little unfair to Grave Upheaval because Grave Upheaval sounds more like Enmity than it does like a Cavern Core band ultimately. But
so does Impetuous Ritual. Impetuous Ritual literally wear diapers on stage, which is just like loincloths. But yeah.
Well, there's a distinction there. Let's clear.
That's why I clarified to be fair to the band.
Yeah.
What?
Oh, is it for pooping? Because then
during a particularly long set, you know, you run into it.
When the riffs hit hard.
When you come and she keeps sucking. But in terms of, well, actually, that's a good segue, because in terms of what this sounds like, you had a track off the new record that you wanted to show off on this little interview here. So what have you got for us, Warg?
This one's called Degradation Temple. It was the last song we recorded. I think it's the second longest one. And it has a lot of movements, and I'm proud of how this song came together. But yeah, it sort of is... It almost doesn't make sense together, but one of the things I'm proud of is that it has a lot of space within it, but it still has a lot of parts that are pretty relentless. Yeah, check it out.
Cool. So let's listen to that one real quick, and we'll talk a little bit about that and a little bit more of the purely musical stuff going on this record. So once again, this is Heretical Sect with Degradation Temple. right, so once again, that was Heretical Sect's Degradation Temple. So why that one for us? What's the gist of that song to you, like thematically or otherwise?
Well, that's the kickoff of the B-side. I think that it's sort of the most comprehensive song we've released in all of the sort of textures it combines into one piece. Also, it's the only time we had guest vocals. My wife is on there, which is awesome.
Oh, is she doing some of the clean
nice.
stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if that was you, because there's like a couple other parts with like clean vocals on the record, aren't there? Is that?
Oh, let me think.
Some on the last track for sure. Yeah.
I think that it was only this song that she did vocals on. But anyways, yeah, there's this sort of moving between suffering and the person kind of inflicting the suffering, and moving from the individuals to the kind of system, back and forth. And I don't know, I feel like it maybe has the most ideas in it, and hopefully it would be kind of where we would go. It's the last song we wrote, and I think that it has the most ideas in it. It also has, I mean, this is like so caveman stupid, but it has like playing in 3, which I've like never really done before, which was kind of a fun experience, to have that swinging back and forth. And then the band keeps playing in that 3 at a blasting tempo, but I switched to 4, I think. At least I was supposed to.
Well, it seems like it worked out either way. So
yeah, so I think it was kind of pushing on our abilities, or pushing on my abilities. You know, when one of these band members comes up with these ideas, I'm so resistant because I know it's going to be hard. But now I'm like, oh man, it's going to be hard, but it's always worth it. So this song definitely has, you know, me growing it as far as a musician, which I have lots of room to grow. I just recently, I play drums. I think last year realized that double strokes exist, which is like, so I've gotten a long way with very little tools, but these guys keep making me learn new things. And so this song, it was also performed live through, so
nice.
That feeling I think is there.
Well, that's how I like to record. You know, I always like to do stuff kind of played through in a single take.
Yeah. Yeah, not the vocals, but everything else. And
yeah, you overdub the vocals, but yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So it breathes. It's got this kind of, you know, I mean, one of the things, I don't have many peeves about music, but one of them is when everything is so locked into a grid that that everything is just so you can just anticipate it, and there isn't a feeling that anything changes as the mood changes. And this kind of flowing atmosphere, for me it's important for it to not be stuck in that way, and to kind of surprise you and speed up as the emotions kind of take you there. The other thing, yeah, I mean, the grid can be great. Industrial, black metal, you know, solo projects where it's a Casio keyboard, like, that's awesome. But there's a lot of middle ground music where it's just locked into this grid and it's fucking boring.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, where you're sort of like pretending not to be locked in. If you make a strength out of the grid quality, or if you like own the fact that you got a drum machine, that's one thing. But to have this like, be almost like simulating a live sound, yeah. I really liked that blast riff that dropped in at the end. That was a nice musical surprise when you were kind of chiming it out, and then it kicks into this blast again towards the end, and it's got this nice sort of kind of downwards riff. Dang, dang, da-dong, dong, dong. It's got a nice kind of hammer and groove there.
I love when you vocalize the riffs.
That's a classic part of the show, is the black metal guy vocalizing the riffs.
Do the whole thing.
Well, you see, well, you know,
That's great.
Well, the only problem
I'm
is
better at humming them in key when I'm not on air. When I'm on air, it's just the rhythms, man.
No,
well,
it's all good.
The only problem is that the best song on the album for both of us is Ritual Inversion.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's far and away our favorite song on the record.
Although listening again, I do think my favorite individual riffs are on the back end of Degradation. Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. I think that the band started to think less and less of that song. But I
which one, Ritual Inversion or
Ritual
Degradation?
Inversion?
Oh.
Yeah.
No, man, that's a killer one.
Oh, great! I'm happy to hear that. Yeah. It's weird to hear these things because, again, it's been a while since I played. They are definitely like actually going back to labels. When I hear blackened death metal, I always think of something technical, and maybe it's kind of stuck in my mind that when those two things are being married, it becomes a masturbatory sound.
Well, I mean, I feel like for you guys, the death metal influences. I mean, obviously, you've got this distinctly black metal aesthetic, but across the album, there's a lot of sort of incantation riffs that I can hear.
Interesting.
Oh, definitely. A lot of these kind of like low winding dissonant tremolo riffs. I mean, a lot of those could be off, Onward to Golgotha or something like that. That was something I picked up on a lot. Structurally, I think a lot of these songs have a lot to do with, like, the Satanist era Behemoth, with these very open spaces. Like, obviously, in terms of, like, discrete musical parts or riffs, you're doing something very different, but kind of the way these songs are laid out reminds me a lot of newer Behemoth, just in terms of these wide open spaces. They function almost more like a trance breakdown or something than they do like a standard kind of metal passage, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I would like to kind of connect to new ideas all happening at the same time. And The Satanist was actually one of those albums that meant a lot to me because I grew up with Behemoth and I was just thought Demigod was so, incredible when I first heard it. I don't know what year that was, but I'm guessing 2002 or 2003 or
something like that. Yeah,
maybe it was a little later when I heard it for the first time. But again, like kind of getting disillusioned with this intensity of like technical death metal, especially because it would never be something I would aspire to play. And then I felt like, well, Behemoth gets to The Satanist, and it's sort of like, in a way, it set me free because it was like, oh, look, they're going, this is where they're going. Because you can only blast and add so many technical parts. You can only do that to yourself for so long. And there's only so much creativity you can squeeze out of adding more and more mechanical parts. And so the stripping away, and then bands like The Devil's Blood or what else comes to mind that sort of are extreme but have this rocking quality. I did find like a lot of solace in hearing that album, just as a musician, because it wasn't like it was like the arms race is over, for me.
This record does have a bit of, I think both the death metal guy and I heard this record has a bit of a goth rock quality to it, which is I like. I'm a huge fan.
Oh man, I love goth music, and I'm not that well versed in it, but one of my greatest discoveries from the podcast was the Chameleons.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, you guys were talking about that, and I went and checked it out and was like, this is like a more interesting version of The Cure for me,
Mm-hmm.
because I haven't heard it my whole life.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Yeah, so that was I don't remember what it came up in reference to, but yeah, I mean, there's bands like Idle Hands, and I get into that stuff because it gives this sort of like, because honestly, like I can put it on with my family, and it's great to
Mm-hmm.
have like a record to put on. Like, have you heard Hollis? Um, it's a kind of a wanky, I don't know, Norwegian or Swiss band that's amazing.
How's it
Swedish band.
spelled?
Hallas.
I'm
It's
not
not
familiar.
goth.
That's out of my wheelhouse. So.
Oh, totally.
Like heavy metal, or?
It's like heavy metal meeting ABBA. I don't know.
So it sounds kind of
Anyways,
like
I have
Ghost?
got plenty of yeah, kind of like Ghost, but it has a far greater relationship to psych rock, actually.
Some guy I've been corresponding with sent from on the Instagram sent this to me a while back. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like on Universal Records.
Mm-hmm.
It's they're wildly popular, but this I don't know. Sometimes the modes of I find a lot of interest in rock music that is, yeah. But my band isn't like that. The band that we play in isn't having that relationship. So if I can just sort of like let some of those goth rock or some of those ideas come in through the vocals or through how I play drums, then that's great.
The big bass and drums. There's more emphasis on rhythm section in this band, I think, than in a lot of death metal, or certainly in a lot of black metal, right?
Yeah, our bass player, again, he's the one with the music degree. He has so many ideas, and he's such an active bassist, and he likes to take ideas that he likes to pit our sounds against each other, which is really interesting. The song that you like, Ritual Inversion, it starts with the bass and one guitar kind of going against the drums and the other guitar. And, we practice in this tiny practice space. And I have all the amps behind me when I'm playing drums. And we kept doing this idea that he had, and I just had no idea what was going on. And I never had any idea what was going on until I heard the recording. And I was like, oh, that's a cool idea. But I just sat through playing, he's got these off-the-wall ideas, but I often don't even know what they sound like until we record them, because they're not pop-oriented, that's for sure. They're more informed by musical theory, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, if I can put a kind of couple catchy lyrical turns in there, then that's a fun idea for me, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it's kind of because you've been talking about kind of the vocals a lot. I mean, at this point, do you see yourself in the band as are the drums or the vocals kind of your primary thing? It sounds like you're kind of leaning towards the latter.
Well, maybe I've been thinking about that more because I haven't been playing drums. I've still been doing some vocal stuff on other projects, but I love playing drums. I think maybe at the moment I'm a little less confident just because I haven't been playing them. I have an electrical kit at home, and I have my drum set at home, but I don't have it set up. And so I've been compensating by just buying drum gear, even though I can't play it. So, I think when quarantine started here, my snare collection skyrocketed to 11 snares.
Isn't that a metalcore band?
Yeah. 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 So, but well, I no. So it's an interesting idea, interesting question, because I think that drums have a lot of necessary requirements, and as a vocalist and sort of leading, doing all the writing for the band and kind of representing the band, it's more about my ideas. my ideas as a drummer are like, hang in there. You know.
So basically the vocals are more, it's an easier way to represent your ideas for the band. You know, you're not locked into a sort of system that you have to be beholden to like you are on the drums.
Oh, totally. Yeah, my ideas for the drums are like, what if I blast and you play slow?
There's nothing wrong with that. That's a classic technique. You know?
Which is like, you blast and I'll play slow. That's like my contribution on drums. And I mean, I sometimes have ideas and I love to play them. I kind of show up to band practice like the most hyped because I just get to make so much noise and just be a little bit insane. But I don't do vocals at practice, and I don't practice vocals with the band. It's something that has really only happened live, maybe a couple practices, and then of course I do all that stuff at home. So those guys never know what it's going to be like until they get it at the end. So yeah, I feel like I've found my voice there.
Aww. I like the lame pun there too.
Yes, that's absolutely.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
So one thing that we were interested in talking about, and we talked about this a little bit before we went on air, was so especially on a label like Gilead, we've talked in fits and starts on the show about this idea of there being these kind of we've used the term like parallel universe black metal to describe a sort of different spheres of the metal scene where you've got all the genres represented, but the people playing the music and the audience that it's for tends to change. In a sense that, and I think this really started probably in the late 2000s or early 2010s, just as a lot more people from like the punk scene and a lot of people from like the New York art scene started to get into black metal, and then a little bit later death metal. So that's something interesting to me, because it seems like you're a guy who is probably into a lot of like much more traditional and kind of classic black and death metal, but the music that you're playing is definitely geared towards a scene of people. It's very hard to articulate this, but
it's kind of you know what there is. There's like this territory that exists between underground extreme metal per se, at least as we understand it, which is kind of our core go-to on the show. And on the other hand, you get mainstream bands, right? Your Behemoths or your sort of Mayhems or whatever, right? Even though those bands are extreme, they've become mainstream by dint of persistence and legend. And then there's this kind of middle tier of stuff that I think a lot of the metal, like the metal press focuses on. The stuff that has this kind of sort of underground, like definitely not like commercial bands, right? You're not going to make any money off of Heretical Sect, right?
No, but, I've done a really good job at losing money with this. For sure.
That's real underground. Do it yourself and lose money in the process.
Yes, for sure. No, I actually think I know what you're saying, or what you're asking. Maybe it's not a question, but it's a statement.
Yeah, putting it out there.
Well, I'm kind of curious about your perspective on it and where you think that you kind of fall in. I mean, because obviously with the internet and everything's splintered out so much that you can have these multiple spheres of everything. It's basically the same kind of music, but it's being approached from these radically different directions. And I'm kind of curious as to what direction you approach it from.
It's an interesting question, and I think you mentioned the label first, and the reason I like and I'm so excited to work with Gilead is because I think first and foremost they emphasize the ideas of the music first over a genre. So you have lots of different influences. The quality is really high, but it's not ticking boxes, like looking for a specific sound. So I think that Adam took a risk with us, and I'm glad that he did. I find it to be an honor to be on that label, because I think that they're really pushing on those boundaries that you're talking about, and that's a meaningful thing for me. Like, I love all my classic black metal and death metal, and relate to that stuff personally, because it meant so much to me. But I definitely want to find some new path. That doesn't mean I have any of these ideas worked out, but like, to have somebody believe in you and say, let's give this a try and see how people respond to it, that means a lot. And there is, this, I think you mentioned New York, there is a sort of avant-garde New York art.
Yeah, it's Brooklyn art student stuff.
Yeah, and to be quite honest with you, like, that is me. That fits me perfectly. I went to art school. I went to, art school on the East Coast. My friends are in those bands. But I think that they are very New York centric, and they're very urban sounding. And
that's interesting.
Oh, yeah, because like Krallis,
division.
Gilead's done a lot for Krallis lately, it looks like. And like
Krallis,
that does sound like it comes from New York.
Yellow Eyes.
Yellow Eyes is a great band from that
Great
sphere.
band.
And they connect to the underground pretty closely, I think.
So I think that also part of this question is there is a lot of this sort of relational inside, outside, what is true, what's not, that we just don't have any control over. And
for sure.
I don't know. I mean, maybe if our pictures were only in black and white, then there would be like a little bit more cultness.
No way, you've got perfectly dorky black metal pictures, man. We got some with the promo. You guys hanging out in the desert with knives and stuff.
And that was like the best. That was like the best day I had this year. It was freaking amazing. Was like doing that photo shoot, which is like so cheesy, but it was really like that much fun.
Yeah, I get it.
And so like I want to lean into that stuff, and I don't, I'm being pretty, like, I've had 2 drinks now, so I'm being pretty earnest.
Those are rookie numbers. We got to pump those numbers up, Warg. What are you talking about?
I don't really drink very much, but so no, I think that the narrowing of that sort of those influences and what we relate to is true musically, but I really do want, Imperial Triumphant sounds like they're from New York. I want to take that same idea of a focused concept in relationship to environment and have it be about where we are from, and that's nice. That's meaningful to me, and I think that it connects to people here. We have like a good following, and like the Zuni Pueblo, for instance, which is an amazingly strange accomplishment or thing to have, right?
Yeah.
And they, that's like a kind of isolated community, and it is like a really kind of cult idea. It's like I send tapes and CDs to somebody in Albuquerque who lives on the Pueblo, his family on the Pueblo, and he drives those things out to those people. He puts them at the local post office, and then metalheads from the community come and get free music because they don't have the internet to be streaming stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know who's keeping score, but like we are at least finding our own way to be underground and connect to people that are from our region.
I
And
gotcha.
I would love to be like considered true or whatever, but it's more important for me to be like, serving my needs and my artistic needs, and however the chips fall, it's, fuck them. So.
Well, it's interesting because you're also kind of looping back into something we've talked about a few times on the podcast, which is what it means to be an American black metal band.
Oh yeah, I really like that discussion in relationship to Pan Native Front.
Pan American Native Front, yeah, and Ephanock, yeah. As well as, yeah, we've touched on it with a few other bands like Mortem and Oldowan Gash and stuff like that.
Oh man,
Little
that
bit with
Oldowan
Into
Gash
Oblivion.
was great. That was another really good interview, good band.
That is still like top 5 records of the year for me. That is such a good record.
It's
But,
really good. I agree.
but it sounds like you're kind of accessing a similar idea of, I mean, probably not as broad as an American black metal band, but a southwestern American black metal band. And I'm kind of interested in your thoughts on that. Like, because it feels like just over the past few years, there's been kind of an explosion of people reinterpreting what USBM means and kind of in their own ways connecting to their own folk traditions within the prism of America. And I guess I was curious, that seems to be, in a sense, something that you guys are doing. Is that right?
Well, I think so, and I hope so. It becomes a little tricky because you don't want to be getting into the cultural appropriation realm, and that's not something that I think that we're doing. I hope we don't speak for anybody else, or just sort of working from historical facts about the region that we live in and sort of confronting it in a way that I think is meaningful to me personally, because it's just synthesizing the books I read and the interests I have and moving it away from the Eurocentric ideas of metal. Like USBM was just imitating European ideas like for 20 years or whatever. And then we had Cascadian black metal, which could be arguably music of the Northwest. But there's no specific sound that I think could be tied to our region yet. But maybe we can contribute to that idea. And I think it's kind of one of the conundrums of music, is that music and technology is that there's much less of a connection to place. It used to be that regional scenes were inevitable because that was the only music you would hear or see was the people around you. And of course, for obvious reasons, internet, so on. There's so much more reach as far as the spread of ideas. And I think it's an intentional choice to look inward, look around you, be aware, take in your local history or sounds or inspiration, and see what you can make of it.